Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 10th episode of Come to the Fire podcast. I'm super excited to welcome Raven Payment today as our special guest, and I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. Buju and Denewe Maganaguk, Nin Raven Payment and Dishnaka. Hello, of my relatives. I am Raven Payment. I am Anishinaabe from the Keweenaw and Sault Ste. Marie Band of Chippewa Indians. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. You are such an amazing, powerful woman and a great mom. And, we started working together a little bit over a year ago. And when I kind of think back on what has transpired and everything, I'm like, wow, talk about meeting somebody and just like things starting to happen. And it was really beautiful, and just wanted to learn a little bit about how you really got to Denver and where you came from. And I know you've had an amazing journey to get here. And so, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, let's do the deep dive into Raven's 4 decades Earthside.
Whatever you choose to share. So,
no, that's great. I didn't come here for compliments, but I'll take them. I was initially born on the East Coast. So I was born in New York, Onondaga Territory. Syracuse, New York, and then I ended up in Maine, where I spent my childhood and graduated high school from. Unironically, or maybe ironically, my high school mascot was the Indians. And so when I was in high school, the Penobscot tribe, who's local in Maine, they had actually petitioned my high school to get rid of this offensive mascot. And there was a handful still in the state back then. And it was really interesting because like the town's demographics is like 98% white. And I was the only Native child in this school. So when this conversation came up, it ended up in my lap. Like, well, what does she think? And so I had to take a really unpopular stance about that mascot, but it actually didn't end up even being changed until like 2019, I think. And I graduated high school in 2000. So, just going to age myself really quick. No. Small town demographics, though, couldn't wait to get out. It's been a socio-economically depressed area. They were a logging town, a lot of paper industry, and as that industry started to die, there wasn't really anything to take its place. So I decided to join the Navy when I was 17, just to get out. And of course, the recruiters are like, you're going to see the world and you're going to do all these great things. And there's like an underlying message of patriotism there. But this was like peace era Clinton. So I joined the Navy and ripped that Band-Aid into adulthood right off, which then spiraled into George Bush getting elected, the USS Cole was bombed, and I was thrust right into the Middle East at a young age. 9/11 happened, and I got out of the military in 2004, and living in San Diego at the time. So it's interesting. The military will ask you where you want to be stationed. I mean, they don't care, but they ask. So everything that I wanted was like east of the Mississippi to like stay closer to home. So here I am in Maine, and I got stationed in San Diego. Like it couldn't have been the more disparate part of the country, which turns out like the universe, whatever, was good for me. I loved California. We were really close to Mexico. So got to, go to the border, go across the border, but, traveled the world for good and bad as part of that campaign of imperialism and colonization. So it's been an interesting journey to grow up and understand pieces that, you're a part of, campaigns and actions that like I don't agree with anymore.
Right.
So in any case, my father was living in Colorado when I got out of the military. So I was like, I'm going to move to Colorado for like 3 months. There's nothing going on out there. Clearly I'm going to come back to California. And that was in 2004.
Okay.
And I never left because I fell in love with it out here.
Yeah. It's a pretty good spot, I have to say. It's
it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and fabulous people here, and that's I think the the military and like growing up in a small town, that's so many people's stories. And, just it's an opportunity kind of veiled in this other thing that's like war and power dynamics and all of those different pieces. But yeah, I mean, it's like that American story of,
It is.
yeah.
And it's very predatory. So in my journeys throughout the country and the world, talking to other people growing up in different places, I was like, what do you mean your entire high school didn't get bused to the armory to take the ASVAB exam? And they were like, no, we didn't do that. And so because we were like a rural, more impoverished area, they bust our high school every year. Wow. All students took the ASVAB, and then the recruiters had access to those test scores to just start going and knocking on doors and making phone calls. I think they were knocking on doors back then. This was the 90s.
Oh yeah,
we were analog.
Yeah, we totally. I mean, like, and that they'd always go like the sports kids. Like you would always like the athletics and it was, and they were always at like football games, basketball games. It was kind of like because they also were in the community or were nearby, and the amount of especially American Indian and Latino kids and Black kids that the military, I mean, the amount of folks who enroll and talk about what a skewed message that's going on, like the propaganda machine right now. It's like, geez, the numbers, like patriotism to like truly trying to keep peace and protect people is like a value. And that I can see how there's that synergy. But while you were going to school and everything, how did you decide what you were going to study, and kind of how did you get into that degree field and everything?
Yeah, interestingly, I have not had a lot of intention behind where I have ended up in life. So moving to Colorado, my father was a foreman for a construction company out here, and they were actually building what was formerly Stapleton, which is now Central Park. So that large development community, I don't even know what we're calling it now.
Yeah.
That's a giant community.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because our site office trailers were actually where the control tower is, which I think now is like a Punch Bowl Social or something there.
It was something. I don't even know if it's still open or something, but yeah, so right there. Okay.
So I moved out here, and so because my dad was working at this construction company and my military background had very few skill sets that did not translate to corporate life, I ended up getting a job working a crew out with that construction company, doing that redevelopment job, running heavy equipment and stuff. So that's kind of how my foray into what we call the AEC industry, so architecture, engineering, and construction. So that is how I ended up where I'm at now. In a really roundabout way. So in any case, I helped work out at Stapleton for like 3.5 years. I did some other jobs on like the Denver Art Museum. I did some work out there. There's I think it's the UC Health building now, out at Fitzsimmons. There's a research facility that I helped build out there. I actually just pulled the photograph recently from our topping out ceremony. And then I drove by and I was like, hey, I did that. It's still standing. Like 15 years later, imagine that.
Yeah.
But then, a few years in, I was like, I'm tired of being dirty and in the elements. And not that I consider myself a princess, but I was very in my princess vibes. So I applied for a job as a receptionist at this architecture firm. And they hired me. I am a terrible receptionist. Well, the owner of that firm, he was Choctaw. And he was a Vietnam era veteran. And he never said it, but I'm pretty sure I only got that job from like the native to native connection. He took a little chance on me.
Right on.
And he was a really sweet man. I actually just found out he passed away earlier this year. Well, I guess last year, 2025. Time is a colonial construct.
Oh, it so is. Oh, yeah.
But he had done some really amazing buildings as an architect. The Ben Nighthorse Campbell building, he had actually designed that one. He was an incredible man. And so that kind of launched my work into the corporate sphere. And yeah, really bad at answering phones, hated being tied to a desk, men asking me to make their coffee. I was like, are your hands broken? Even though it was technically part of my job. When they asked me to wash dishes, though, because the dishwasher had broken in the office, that was like kind of a step too far, and like my demise when the economic crash following 2008 happened. So, but through there, I ended up getting into, we call it proposals. So responding to solicitations to do new work. Eventually, I went from architecture into engineering, transportation infrastructure specifically. And so kind of having that technical background from being in the field translated pretty well into being able to understand how to take things to a conceptual level design, write to many different audiences as to why we should build it this way, why we're better than another company to do it, how we're qualified, and like positioning ourselves even just outside of price. Like I don't work on hard bid jobs.
Yeah, okay.
So massive alternative delivery, like complex highways. There's a number of projects I've worked on throughout Denver. I hate to do this one, but I-25 Broadway. That was one of the jobs I worked on, Crystal Valley Parkway, where they're putting in new on-ramps and an overpass over I-25 down near Castle Rock. But then other jobs around the country. The Twin Ports Interchange in Duluth, Minnesota was one I worked on for like half a year. The Gordie Howe Bridge, which is like just finishing up. I worked on that when I was pregnant with my daughter.
Oh my goodness.
And they're just about to like finish that job. So it's interesting to see like how long like things take.
Like years and years.
Yeah.
I mean, to get to put together all the funding stacks to get these projects done. And wow, that's amazing to be able to point to all of those different projects.
Yeah, and I look at things now and I'm like, I touched that, and I'm like, watch it like collapse in a couple of years. I'd be like, I had nothing to do with that.
Oh no.
Well, when
I'm
US
sure
36
it's
failed,
all-
a couple, what was that, 5 or 6 years ago?
I think so.
When that retaining wall failed. The company I was working for, we actually responded to that to do the emergency repair for that.
Okay.
So that was another job I worked on.
Wow.
The Seattle High Bridge, when that one failed, I actually had COVID when we bid on that. It was an emergency contract. And I would like get around to revisions in, I would hear my computer ding and I would sit up in bed.
Oh my gosh.
And I would like go through my portion and then I would hit send and I would lay back down.
Yeah.
And be like, the CDC said I might die.
Yeah.
This could be the last email I ever sent.
Oh my God. Even thinking back on like those times, and I feel like the last like 3 years, it was just like, okay, let's pack that away. But for some reason, it's kind of like coming out more. And somebody on a call yesterday was like, yeah, anybody, like, we know everybody has PTSD in some form from that part, but it was so surreal. Just like those scenarios of like, okay, I'm doing a job, but I also might die here. And
like,
it's just
scary.
like, yeah.
Because we didn't
and
know
how much as
much.
like human beings we're like, okay, let's just keep rolling.
But let me
Let's
just keep my contributions to the corporate machine.
Exactly.
In case this is it. It's not, a letter to my daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. Wow.
That's an interesting thing you just said, though, that I think about often about like this society that we have been born into and the idea that everybody has, PTSD of some kind because like it's hard out here. Whatever angle you're looking at it from, like we're all struggling, and that really makes me so sad because what are we doing? Where everyone is just like head down, working through whatever trauma they have because we have created such a cesspool that it is traumatic just to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where, you're like, what are those decisions? Like you can't have it all. I know we would love to think that, but you have to make hard decisions on like, what's your balance or what are your boundaries? And like, I feel like if we can't empower others or ourselves to like be in that space personally, like there's no way we're ever going to help anybody else or
Yeah.
like broaden that. And so like that community piece is so important just to like, yeah, because there are so many people that just don't know what their next step can be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Myself
Or,
included.
I mean, and
Not trying to,
what
yeah.
is having it all?
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. I'm like, I I think with age, it sort of is like a time hits different.
Yeah.
And like there's some days like I literally, and like Sam can probably attest for this, like I'm like 13 in a certain, like at home when you're feeling like comfortable and you're like, okay, I can play around and like be that kid. And then you're like, okay, I'm like in my 20s today and I can like pick out where I'm showing up and like, and I'll be like, oh, Stacey, grown up time. Like you gotta like say it in your head, but then you gotta go do this. And like the masks that I think people have to wear a lot
Yeah.
with that pain and trauma, and anybody who like is go at this point, I'm like, what are you doing?
Where are you going?
Yeah. Death is going to find you. I am sorry.
People who jog early, I'm like, where are you going?
Yeah,
What
oh
are
my
you
God.
doing? Should I be running?
I found out long ago I am not a runner. No, there are people, there's two sorts of people, like runners and non-runners. I am non-runner.
I say that.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
before anyone comes for me, I used to be a runner. I used to be that
Exactly.
person in the morning jogging
Exactly.
early
Yeah.
for no
Oh
reason
my
other
God.
than my own, I don't know, sadistic
Oh my gosh.
machinations on my own.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so what, like to keep yourself like feeling good and like, yeah, running or jogging is definitely not that for me, but what do you do? I know you get outdoors quite a bit and
I mean, there's two trains of thought here. So I love hiking, and I think that's where like my love for Colorado, like
Yeah.
really took shape. Was like, I mean, growing up in Maine, you can hike, but it's like it's a different type of hiking.
yeah, it's not like the like when because Serenity's in Boston.
Yeah.
And so we've had a chance and I'm like it's beautiful, but like wow, when you see these mountains.
We didn't really
you're
hike when
just-
I was growing up. We had like I grew up in a trailer, just to be clear, and so we lived that
too.
like that backwoods.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to curse?
Yeah. Oh yes,
Oh, yeah,
you are.
so we
Yeah.
call it it's bumblefuck territory.
We used to say
So-
Bumfuck Kansas.
Yeah,
Kansas.
so it's I grew up in like bumblefuck middle of nowhere. Despite our mascot that made CNN years later. But anyways, we didn't really hike, but we had like everyone was really good at like working on fixing four-wheelers, so we always had ATVs. Someone always had some kind of broken truck that we
Yeah.
would go running through the woods, or if it was spring, we go mudding. So we didn't really hike. So when I moved out here to Colorado, like hiking is just like you're out with nature. If you can manage to avoid the younger friends that go out with their boombox and their speaker, like that's rude. Can I just take that hot take?
Yeah.
No
Oh.
one wants to hear your playlist. I don't care how good you think it is. Leave it in the car or for your friends when they come over. You can
That's
be
what
an
these
amateur
are
DJ.
for.
Yeah. So hot take. You can come for me for that. I will die on that hill.
No. Agreed.
But I do love to hike. I mean, I live in a place where I back up kind of near Castlewood Canyon State Park.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like outside of the state park, there's just a really cool canyon system. So like I love to just be out in nature. If I can be working in the corporate environment, though, I am often in front of a computer and under fluorescent lights. You know, I wish I was a spa person, but I'm not. I like to do yoga. I'm like, but then conversely, there's like the unhealthy habits where like I have like turned to alcohol and stuff in the past. Like I had a bad day, I want a whiskey, and as I've gotten older, obviously alcohol doesn't agree with me. Not that it ever agreed with me, but like it's just easier to see how smaller amounts really affect my like physical well-being, like sleeping well later, even if I feel like it takes the edge off the anxiety, like in the short term. And of course, you know, there's this other conversation about being a Native person and our rates of, you know, substance abuse. and just the history of like these terrible things that this liquid, this drug has done to our community and has just devastated the well-being of like my people and my community and my own family, and the intersections, like working in the missing and murdered space and understanding, the negative effects that this has had to contribute to this crisis of violence against Native people. So as I've gotten older, it's one of those things where it's a struggle to not turn to that, but also being cognizant of how it can spiral if I do go that way. So I try to be in nature. I try to like spend time with, my daughter, who is just like this light in the universe. And I was like, is this what it's like to not be traumatized by the time you're 7?
It really, I mean, like you can tell, like that's, I think, the beauty of like being a mom and seeing your kids, and like that's why it all matters.
Yeah.
Because you can see that and you're like, wow, like how do we keep them safe?
Totally.
And yeah.
It does shift your perspective. I had a coworker I made him so uncomfortable, and like I was being very honest, and I still stand behind what he said, but he was like commenting on my daughter just being so friendly and kind and free and, a joy to be around. And he was like, wow, he was like, that's your daughter? And he was like, what happened to you? And I was like, trauma. And then like the whole table, we were at happy hour or something, the whole table got quiet. I was like, so anyways, about these bridge plans.
But so true.
Just killed the vibes.
You're like, dude, wake up. Like that question.
And of course, it was a white dude too.
No,
like,
yeah.
Of course it was. I was like, I don't know, intergenerational trauma, my man.
You're like, everything you have to be ready to defend yourself or to,
right?
Like, it's just like you suck the joy out of it. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, I do have my little trademark, like Raven ruins everything.
Oh, no, I have never witnessed that ever. You always lift others up. I really, I mean, you match energy. And so like you do you. And that's what I love, because like you're going to show up the same space all the time. And I love that because there's a consistency. People who bounce around, I'm like, who are you in the morning? Like when you look at yourself in the mirror, like I know my good, bad, and ugly. I know it. I know it, and I can see where different parts are coming out. And I think that kind of like recognizing where you got some of your trauma at different points in your life, to like, you can't ever unwind it, but you can rewrite how you think about it. And